Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our Distinguished Speakers Series lecture this evening. My name's Michael Wesley, I'm the Executive Director of the Lowy Institute, and before we start, can I ask everyone to either switch their mobile phones to silent or turn them off. Papua New Guinea's and Australia's fates have been deeply intertwined for well over a century and will remain as deeply intertwined for at least the next century. It is our closest neighbour. One can walk from Papua New Guinea to Queensland at low tide. Australia is Papua New Guinea's largest trading partner, and Papua New Guinea is Australia's 15th largest trading partner. Our bilateral merchandise trade exceeds $15 billion a year. Papua New Guinea has over $1.3 billion invested in Australia. Our people-to-people links stretch back to the colonial era and the Pacific War, and they are refreshed through the Kokoda pilgrimage made by hundreds of Australians each year. Sport and education provide ongoing dynamic links. And yet, among all of this continuity, it is hard to escape the impression that Australia's relations with its closest neighbour are at something of a tipping point. Over the past 35 years, we've come to view Papua New Guinea through the lens pretty much of development assistance. Since 1975, Australia has provided over $14 billion of development assistance to Papua New Guinea, and it remains our largest bilateral aid partner. But this is the wrong lens through which to view our bilateral relationship. Whereas Australian aid accounted for 41% of Papua New Guinea's government budget in 1974-75, today Australian aid amounts to just 5% of Papua New Guinea's GDP. And the economic relationship between our two countries is set to change even more dramatically in the next decade. Papua New Guinea is undergoing a resources boom that will see its GDP more than double within a decade. Plans to pipe LNG across the Torres Strait will further transform the bilateral economic relationship. Meanwhile, Papua New Guinea's birth rate means that its population will grow from less than 30% of Australia's today to nearly 40% the size of our population by 2030. Australia's relations with its closest neighbour are set to change beyond recognition in the years ahead. Well, ladies and gentlemen, our speaker this evening has been doing a lot of thinking about Australians' relations with Papua New Guinea. She has just returned from a visit to our northern neighbour. Julie Bishop is Deputy Leader of the Opposition and the Shadow Spokesperson for Foreign Affairs and Trade. She was elected to the House of Representatives in 1998 as the member for Curtin. She served in the Howard government as Minister for Education, Science and Training, Minister for Ageing and Minister assisting the Prime Minister for Women's Affairs. Before entering politics, she had a long and distinguished career as a corporate lawyer, most recently as managing partner with the firm Clayton Utz in Perth. She is a graduate of the University of Adelaide and Harvard University. Ms Bishop serves on a range of community and civil society organisation boards and is a director of the West Coast Eagles AFL club, which I note is firmly within the top 8, very close to the final series. So, ladies and gentlemen, please do join me in welcoming Julie Bishop to the Lowy Institute.
Thank you for that introduction. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted that the High Commissioner of Papua New Guinea, Charles Lapani, is here this evening. He is a good friend of Australia and works tirelessly to improve awareness and understanding of PNG amongst Australians, as well as build the people-to-people connections that are so important to a healthy bilateral relationship. Papua New Guinea is an enormously complex nation. It is regarded as the most linguistically diverse country on earth, with more than 800 languages spoken by its 6.5 million citizens, with over 80% of its population existing on subsistence farming. Development in Papua New Guinea is in part hostage to its geography. Many of its local communities are some of the most remote and inaccessible in the world. As a country, it is less urbanised than all others, except Burundi. While I do not claim to be an expert on PNG, the reality of all this was brought home during my recent visit to Papua New Guinea, during which I had the opportunity to visit the first LNG project in the country, currently under construction in the Southern Highlands. The partners in this $15 billion project include ExxonMobil as operator, Oil Search, Santos and the PNG government, amongst others. We flew from Port Moresby into Moro and were required to take helicopters to reach the deepest parts of the Highlands region, the usual mode of transport for people, equipment, machinery and supplies connected with the LNG project. As many here will attest, it is a land of unbelievable beauty, with impressive mountains and cliff faces rising out of dense, lush rainforest. Wild rivers wind their way through deep, rugged gorges. The sheer logistics of constructing massive LNG facilities in this remote and seemingly untouched location must be a nightmare. Yet I had asked an Exxon representative how the project would rate in terms of difficulties compared with other similar projects in developing countries around the world, with a score of 1 being easy and a score of 10 being extremely difficult. Interestingly, he gave this project a very positive score of 2 from the location and logistical perspective, but a score of 9 for the social and cultural challenges. In other words, the mammoth task of constructing conditioning plants, production facilities, airstrips, roads, accommodation camps for thousands of workers, as well as a 750-kilometre pipeline across the mountains and a 400-kilometre seabed pipeline to Port Moresby, was relatively manageable compared with the task of managing the demands, fears, grievances and expectations of the landowners and local villagers. It must also be noted that it is a land where geography and limited state capacity have combined to ensure that government services and infrastructure are noticeable mainly for their absence. For me, this pretty well sums up the two sides to the PNG story. On the one hand, Papua New Guinea is at an important juncture in its development. It is on the verge of a mining and resource boom that should generate massive foreign exchange inflows, with the potential to radically alter the course of its economic and social development. With the number of large mineral and resource projects soon to come online, there is a sense of optimism and expectation that a new beginning for the country is just around the corner. If current forecasts are realised, the mining and resource projects planned and underway will more than double the size of the PNG economy within a decade. While there has been over 20 years of mineral exploration in the country, the PNG LNG project alone is expected to double the country's gross domestic product and triple its exports. It is the largest private sector investment ever undertaken in Papua New Guinea and is expected to produce over 9 trillion cubic feet of gas over the course of its life. The sheer size of this project can be gauged by the fact that PNG's gross domestic product will rise in real terms from 8.6 billion kina in 2006 to an average of 18.2 billion kina, 2.5 kina to the Aussie dollar. The first deliveries of LNG are scheduled to take place in 2014. Supply contracts have been signed with key buyers, Japan, Korea and China. According to an economic impact study by ACEL Tasman, the project has the potential to transform the economy of Papua New Guinea, boosting GDP and export earnings, providing a major increase in government revenue, royalty payments to landowners, creating employment opportunities during construction and operation, and providing a catalyst to further gas-based industry development. With the economy predicted to grow by over 8%, there is a lot to be excited about, over PNG's economic performance. The current period of economic growth, the longest since independence, has had a beneficial effect on the country's poverty levels, which are estimated to have declined by more than 8% between 2003 and 2008. That is one side of the PNG story. On the other hand, enormous social development challenges still exist. Currently ranked 137th out of 169 countries on the United Nations Human Development Index, Papua New Guinea faces significant challenges with still high poverty rates, poor life expectancy and high infant and maternal mortality. The population is increasing at 2.7% per year. Unemployment is high and civil unrest is growing. According to the World Bank, gross national income in PNG in 2007, when measured for purchasing power parity, was $1,870. This placed it second last in a list of select East Asia and Pacific economies, only slightly in front of Cambodia. It ranked the lowest in terms of life expectancy at birth and access to an improved water source. According to the Asian Development Bank, only 1 in 10 Papua New Guineans have access to electricity. In 2010, the average time spent attending school in PNG was 4.3 years. According to AusAid, PNG is unlikely to achieve any of the Millennium Development Goals by 2015. Outside the urban centres where government capacity is more pronounced, it is in the remote and regional areas that the effects of poverty are felt most heavily. Extending government services and infrastructure beyond urban centres must be one of the biggest challenges facing PNG if poverty is to be reduced and living standards increased. This is particularly important if improvements are to be achieved in child and maternal health because, according to figures published by the World Health Organization, 86% of births occurred in rural areas. That was in 2006. While progress has been achieved in combating the spread of HIV/AIDS, much more work still needs to be done. The prevalence rate in PNG currently stands around 1%. However, such was the initial concern at its growing prevalence that parallels were drawn with countries in sub-Saharan Africa where the disease is rife. Papua New Guinea also faces the difficult task of strengthening its institutions and levels of good governance. While the PNG LNG project will bring huge benefits for Papua New Guinea, it also presents a unique set of challenges that will test the institutional capacity of the government. The dangers of Dutch disease are well known to countries with a dominant energy and mineral resource sector. Papua New Guinea's reliance on export earnings from its energy and mineral resources leaves it vulnerable to a potential downturn in the global economy or international commodity prices. The 2009 PNG budget papers, for example, foreshadowed a 25% decline in domestic tax revenues brought about by the global financial crisis. Promoting growth in other sectors of the economy is therefore crucial. This means reinvesting earnings of its mining boom back into the economy in the form of increased recurrent and development expenditure. With revenue flooding in, there is also the concern that political will for further reform in other areas will falter. As Aaron Batten has written for the East Asia Forum, those provinces which have recorded the largest earnings from resource extraction have been plagued by the weakest governance, the poorest levels of service delivery, and in many cases, violence. Strong fiscal management will be required to control the effects of the booming resource sector as further upward pressure is placed on already high inflation levels. Inflation has the negative effect of driving up the cost of essential household staples, making it harder for individuals and families to escape the poverty trap. A rising currency also damages the competitiveness of local exports, such as in the cash crop sector, making it more difficult for growers to participate in and benefit from the global economy. Reducing this pressure through the creation of sovereign wealth funds is a positive step. As the past has shown us, however, these funds must be properly managed. Given the expected sharp rise in the country's income with the potential to increase imports, decrease exports and affect the non-resource sector, it was apparent from my discussions with PNG officials that they are anxious to avoid the symptoms of Dutch disease. It is encouraging that the PNG government has set up a joint Treasury Bank of PNG working group to consider options for the establishment of a sovereign wealth fund to manage the expected large revenues generated by the LNG project. The lessons from the 1990s mineral boom are harsh. The increased export earnings at that time caused the exchange rate to appreciate. The large incomes earned by the workers, the landowners and the government led to a consumption boom and inflation spike. Mismanagement, waste, corruption, excessive spending and a collapse in commodity prices all combined to deny PNG the long-term benefits that should have been derived from that boom. Sectors of the economy, including agriculture, are still recovering from the negative effects. There is a current debate as to whether the sovereign wealth funds will be established onshore or offshore, but I understand that the government has decided there will be 3 integrated and coordinated funds: a stabilisation fund, an infrastructure fund and a future generations savings fund. An ever-present challenge is the Wontok system, which acts as a social security safety net, where people are obliged to support their relatives and tribal groups. I met with Dame Carol Kiddu, the Queensland-born wife of the late PNG Chief Justice, Saburi Kiddu, a delightful woman and deeply, deeply committed to Papua New Guinea. She married and moved to PNG in the late 1960s. After Saburi's death, Dame Carol was elected to Parliament in 1997 and is currently the only female member of the PNG Parliament. We discussed the challenge of a work-life balance for busy female members of Parliament, but she put it all in perspective as she explained that she supports many of her late husband's relatives and, as a matter of routine, arrives home from a busy day in her electorate to cook an evening dinner for 20 or more. The Wontok system is ingrained in PNG society, but there is a need to build understanding that it cannot be used as an excuse for corruption or abuse of power. Next year's election will be a test for PNG. With the ill health of Sir Michael Somare, there is an increased level of uncertainty surrounding the outcome. While the Coalition is aware of the many challenges facing PNG, we are confident that they can be overcome. From my perspective, our relationship with Papua New Guinea must be one of our highest foreign policy priorities. Australia and Papua New Guinea do enjoy a special relationship, bound together by the closeness of our shores and united by history, epitomised by Kokoda. The destinies of our two countries are tightly connected. As Papua New Guinea prepares to enter this unique period in its history, the Coalition believes that Australia must stand firmly alongside the PNG government and its people in their efforts to fulfil the country's immense potential and lay claim to its rightful status as a natural leader in the Pacific Ocean region. I believe that we should look to PNG to place a greater investment in its own development and uphold standards of good governance and accountability. On the international stage, I believe that Australia should work more closely with the PNG government as stakeholders in the region to promote stability and foster greater levels of prosperity. During my visit, I met with the recently appointed Foreign Minister, Ano Pala, which turned out to be his first diplomatic meeting with an overseas representative. I was chuffed. He has a long-standing love of Australia and even trained with the Hawthorn AFL club as a 17-year-old. He rightly describes Australia and PNG as permanent partners. It must be a partnership founded on mutual respect and shared benefits. A coalition government will strive to reset the relationship based on an economic and strategic partnership rather than aid donor and recipient. It is time to leave behind notions from past eras in our relationship. Like all relationships, we have experienced our shares of highs and lows. The point is not whether we have our differences, but how we manage them that matters. At these times, we must avoid any tendency to revert to old labels and stereotypes, which undermines our ability to further strengthen our ties. There must be a firm focus on self-sufficiency rather than aid dependency. In the same way that PNG is entering a unique period in its development, we are approaching a turning point in our bilateral relationship. Australia's development assistance to Papua New Guinea, estimated to be $482 million in 2011-2012, has declined as a percentage of PNG's GDP over the years. With the revenue from resource projects set to boost its economy even further, Australian aid will play a comparatively lesser role in PNG's development. The Coalition supports the current focus of Australia's development assistance on the crucial areas of health and education. We believe that as the PNG government takes on a larger role in the delivery of services and conditions improve, Australian assistance should progressively be directed towards areas that will help facilitate economic growth. The former Howard government recognised this crucial connection between economic growth and poverty reduction. Training the workforce is a major priority, and Australia is playing a part with support for the education system more broadly, but more particularly with the establishment in mid-2007 of the Australia Pacific Technical College. An initiative of the Howard government, the Technical College, with locations in Port Moresby as well as other Pacific islands, offers students the opportunity to gain Australian standard skills and qualifications, including in the automotive, manufacturing, construction and electrical trades. I met with a number of the students during my visit, and they were very keen to be among the many thousands who will be employed on PNG resource projects. In 2007, the Howard government also established the Enterprise Challenge Fund for the Pacific and Southeast Asia to provide grants to small businesses that had viable commercial projects with demonstrable benefits to the community. This was a first. The Enterprise Challenge Fund aimed to stimulate growth and employment opportunities and ensure that the most disadvantaged members of society had an opportunity to participate in the economy. I visited a small business in Port Moresby which had used a grant from the Enterprise Challenge Fund to purchase processing equipment from India for spices and oils. It was about a $150,000 grant, and it was building up a successful export business. The benefits from the grant have flowed on to the hundreds of growers and their families that the small business directly supports. And you can now buy its various products at gourmet stores in Sydney, including coffee beans and vanilla pods and cinnamon sticks and other delights. The Asian Development Bank and the International Finance Corporation are also working in this space to promote growth and expand access to financial services. Resource projects are providing opportunities for small and medium businesses to increase their production and distribution. Providing access to capital is ultimately a job for the private sector. However, our aid program can fill a gap as the business sector matures. Further, I believe that Australia should redouble its efforts to negotiate the Pacific Agreement for Closer Economic Relations, otherwise known as PACER+. This agreement presents a significant opportunity for Australia and the Pacific Island countries to cement a closer economic relationship that will promote economic growth, open up markets, provide employment and raise standards of living. The Institute for International Trade states that PACER+ could also address barriers to economic integration, promote public and private sector investment and build capacity in trade-related areas. I know both Australia and Papua New Guinea are keen to promote PACER+. While trade liberalisation is never easy, the results are worth it, and this also applies to the telecommunications sector of PNG. In its submission to a Senate committee inquiry on the economic challenges facing Papua New Guinea and the island states of the Southwest Pacific, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade stated that the liberalisation of the mobile phone market had expanded coverage and reduced consumer prices significantly, providing a boost to small businesses. Again, the contrasts can only be appreciated when you're there. As we were driving down a remote road in the Southern Highlands, a woman was walking by with a bundle of sticks balanced on her head, and as I looked, I noticed that she was busy talking on her mobile phone. Now, creating an environment that is capable of sustaining long-term economic growth is vital to Papua New Guinea with its young population and high birth rate. Moving our relationship from a development to an economic focus will require action by the PNG government to strengthen business conditions in the country. In areas where Australian help is still needed to provide service delivery, we must find better ways to do it. We should better recognise the work that the private sector plays in overseas development. The role of public-private partnerships features strongly in the US development program. According to US aid, the successful implementation of activities often requires expertise in marketing, recruiting, training, logistics, manufacturing, policy and advocacy. Because these are core competencies in business, many companies have personnel who excel in these areas, and they are used in USAID's activities. The energy and mineral resource companies in PNG are already active participants in the development area. These companies have provided new infrastructure, roads and bridges that otherwise would not exist. Oil Search, for example, is reaching out to local villages, providing them with services such as schools, as well as basic medical facilities and clinics raising awareness of HIV/AIDS. If the United Nations Millennium Development Goals are to be realised in PNG, these companies will continue to play an important role. Their networks are not only more efficient than government, they reach further into the country where living conditions are at their lowest. The success of their outreach programs has been acknowledged by the international aid community. In 2010, for example, Oil Search was nominated by the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis and Malaria as a principal recipient for its program in Papua New Guinea. Other avenues outside government channels, such as churches, local community groups and non-government organisations, must also be leveraged. Churches already provide healthcare and education services in Papua New Guinea. The Coalition has in the past been highly critical of the Australian Government's reliance on technical assistance. According to a review by the Australian National Audit Office in 2009, Australia spent nearly double the proportion of its development assistance on consultants compared with the OECD average. Evidence before the 2010 review of the PNG-Australia Development Cooperation Treaty suggested, quote, that the capacity building through advisors model is not working. This assistance has dismayed many people in PNG, with reports of excessive salaries for consultants being seen as boomerang aid. I note that while the Australian Government has taken steps to reduce the number of highly paid consultants, there is a need for skills and expertise in governance and administration to be institutionalised. From my meetings in Papua New Guinea, it was clear that there is support for the continuation of the Strong in Government program, which has been credited with achieving reform and improved levels of governance in key areas such as Treasury and Finance. This initiative grew out of the Enhanced Cooperation program initiated by the former Howard government. This process should be strengthened further, with Australian funds used to support placement opportunities for select Papua New Guineans in all levels of government in Australia. Increased opportunity for twinning would improve the transfer of knowledge and skills that are needed in areas such as basic service delivery, research and policy formation, and public service management. With an improving economy, PNG will have an opportunity to better equip its defence forces. Australia must be alert to ensuring that it remains the defence partner of choice. As each year passes, Australia loses part of a generation of people with a deep knowledge and connection to PNG from its pre-independence days. Australia and Papua New Guinea must work to build a new generation of networks that will carry our relationship forward. This includes building relationships with current and future leaders in government, in business and in the community. This must be driven from the highest levels of the Australian Government. Another possible area of closer collaboration is sport. Like Australia, sport cuts across cultural, social and geographic barriers in Papua New Guinea. Rugby league in particular has achieved an almost religious status. Time and time again, I was struck by the influence of Queensland's rugby league stars, from young boys throughout the Southern Highlands wearing maroon jerseys to the extensive coverage in local newspapers. It was overwhelming. When I mentioned to some local journalists at a dinner in Port Moresby, hosted by our very competent and professional High Commissioner, Ian Kemish, that perhaps we should reinstate the International Schoolboy Rugby League competition, I opened up a fierce debate about how soon it would be before PNG could have a team in the NRL. I met with the manager of a huge construction company who related how his 2,000 workers refused to go back to work on the day of a visit to the site by Mal Meninga. Such was their determination to see and hopefully touch their idol. I was told by astute observers of PNG culture that the Rugby League State of Origin series in particular has the power to unite the nation like no other issue. A deeply tribal country with its 800 languages, where family and tribe loyalty comes first and last, it seems the people of PNG are at one in their love of rugby league. It was reported to me that when PNG trialled a preferential voting system, voting slips bearing the faces of Queensland icons Mal Meninga, Wally Lewis and Darren Lockyer were used as the mock candidates rather than local politicians to be sure of a strong voter turnout for the test run. Some people were reportedly deeply disappointed to find that they had not in fact voted in Meninga as national leader. I think that we should harness the immense goodwill and develop a sport and diplomacy initiative within the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Opening up new opportunities for dialogue and increasing the level of trust between our two nations will be important as we deal with issues that are likely to emerge in the coming years. One such issue will be the referendum on Bougainville's future, to be held at a time between 2015 and 2020. The Coalition strongly supports ongoing dialogue between the PNG government and the autonomous region of Bougainville, and stands ready to assist in any way possible to ensure that goodwill is maintained. As permanent partners and close friends, Australia must be committed to helping the people of Papua New Guinea along the road to a more sustainable and prosperous future. With its economy expected to grow sharply in the coming years, PNG is well positioned to take hold of its destiny. This will require strong leadership and an unrelenting determination on the part of the PNG government to succeed. The Coalition is confident that Papua New Guinea has the potential to make this transformation. Under the Coalition policy of appointing a Minister for International Development Assistance, I expect that Papua New Guinea will be the primary focus for that ministry as we use development assistance and access to our markets to expand opportunities for growth and employment. Ultimately, it will be our actions, not our words, that will demonstrate beyond doubt that Papua New Guinea is one of Australia's top foreign policy priorities. I thank the Lowy Institute for the opportunity to speak this evening about resetting our relationship with Papua New Guinea so that the people of our two countries believe that we are equal partners in a joint destiny.
Julie, thank you so much for a wonderful speech. I believe there's about 20 minutes or so for some question and answer, if you're prepared to endure that. I might start things off. You're from Western Australia, a big resource state, a state with a very long history of resource-led development. What are the lessons from WA that you would suggest are the ones that PNG might take heed of, and what are the mistakes from WA's history in relation to its resource sector that it might be wary of?
In fact, I was struck by the similarities with the challenges facing PNG, albeit different in scale, in different geographic locations, but having witnessed firsthand the immense development of LNG projects in the north of Western Australia and comparing them with what is happening in PNG, the development challenges are similar in terms of logistics and the like. And again, the economic benefits for Western Australia and for PNG are undeniable. In our own way, in the West, we have had to face the challenges of the benefits from the resources booms not being shared amongst the Western Australian community. And, for example, in the 2008 election, one of the most successful election promises by the National Party was a royalties for regions scheme. And underpinning that was a recognition that not everybody had shared in the great benefits of a mining and resource boom. In its own way, these are the challenges that PNG faces to ensure that the benefits from the mining boom can be shared by as many people as possible in the community. But the issues such as finding enough skilled workers are as apparent in PNG as they are in Western Australia. Taking people from one section of the community, providing them extremely well-paid jobs and security in the mining and resource sector affects the non-mining and resource sector. So I felt very at home in a number of the discussions we had because I identified so many of the same issues. Again, I think this is where Western Australia and Australia can assist PNG. We do have a world-class reputation for mining and resource development, and we certainly have expertise to share. And while we are extremely competitive with other nations, I feel that given the relationship between Australia and Papua New Guinea, there would be many opportunities for us to share our experience, our technical expertise and the like. Also, on the question of sovereign wealth funds, obviously we have experience with working with royalty payments to state governments, trying to put in place funds for the future. The Australian government likewise, the Howard government set up a future fund, and we have expertise we can share. I understand that David Murray, who heads up Australia's future fund, has spent time in Papua New Guinea talking with Treasury officials and Bank of PNG officials about different ways to set up future funds that will last and benefit future generations. So notwithstanding the differences in our economic size, the challenges were remarkably similar.
Okay. Just here in the side.
Thank you. I wonder if you see any long-term risk with China's interests in natural resources in PNG?
Most certainly China has an interest in PNG as it does in many other resource-rich countries, including countries in Africa and elsewhere in the Pacific. And China's interests are very much resource demand driven. My point about ensuring that we were the defence partner of choice was a perhaps not so subtle reference to the fact that China in some countries is offering or gifting equipment and loans and development assistance in a number of ways. Australia should be acutely aware of that. And I don't believe that Papua New Guinea is playing the China card with us, but we should certainly be alert to any vacuum that could occur. And I believe that if we maintain a strong relationship that develops into the economic partnership that I envisage, then I don't see China's interest or investment in Papua New Guinea as being anything other than an opportunity for PNG.
Jenny.
Jenny Hayward-Jones from the Lowy Institute. Mrs Bishop, thanks for a great talk. It's really interesting, and I'm glad you had an interesting time in Papua New Guinea too. You just mentioned in response to Michael's question the issue of skilled labour in PNG, but I was wondering if it was raised with you in Papua New Guinea, the issue of unskilled labour and labour migration, whether there is still a big interest in developing that with Australia.
Yes, there does seem to be. I mean, the unemployment rate is obviously extremely high, and the unskilled labour is very much in demand, but the LNG project operators are running trade training courses, they're running skills training courses to take the unskilled and unemployed and turn them into contributing employees. And I think a significant effort is underway. For example, the LNG project currently has a workforce of about 7,000, and I understand about 75% are PNG citizens. At the higher technical end, they tend not to be, and clearly that's an opportunity to upskill the PNG workforce. But the projects have the capacity to absorb literally thousands of people, and so the challenge will be to not only find sufficient people in Papua New Guinea, but also other Pacific islands. Now that's going to have an impact in the Pacific as people are drawn to the opportunities in Papua New Guinea. At the Australian Pacific Technical College, I met with a number of students who were from Solomon Islands and elsewhere, but they were all there to gain accreditation and qualifications to work on the PNG projects. So I think that will be a challenge. There is concern, I think it's fair to say, about some of the Chinese resource projects where they bring in a workforce from China, and I think we must be ever alert to the resentment that that could create. So there are opportunities, but I think the education system currently in PNG doesn't lend itself yet to skilling sufficient numbers of the workforce. So it's inevitable that workers will come in from elsewhere.
Donald McLean, just on your remarks in your address, Minister, I noticed that you said that the state of origin united the whole 600 tribes in New Guinea. I wonder if there's any possibility to unite the 2 tribes in this country.
I'm sorry, that there might be.
Is there a possibility it will unite the 2 tribes in this country?
Well, I was amazed that that Queensland seemed to dominate so heavily. I didn't see a blue jersey anywhere, I'm afraid. So it was united as one. But and I make the comment not flippantly. I really was struck by the level of enthusiasm and interest in the state of origin. Admittedly, I arrived the day after the state of origin game, and they were still celebrating, I can tell you. But it was a topic of discussion wherever we went, and references to Malmaninga were made often in different contexts. He was up there in 2005, 2006 as part of an AusAid HIV/AIDS awareness campaign, and it seemed to me that being able to harness the goodwill that people such as Malmaninga are able to generate in PNG would be a really interesting initiative for us to undertake. And that level of goodwill over sporting heroes can't be just brushed aside. We really should do something positive with it. I mean, being an AFL club director, I should of course be pushing the AFL, but I'm afraid it didn't get a look in when we were on in the aftermath of the state of origin.
I should also mention that the Australian rugby halfback is of Papua New Guinea descent, so we're making full use of Papua New Guinea's talents.
Yes, we are. Although it's interesting, the focus was definitely on Meninga, Lewis, and Lockyer. They were the jerseys with their names on them. So there you go.
It shows how sensible Papua New Guineans are.
Indeed.
Do we have one last question? I think we've got time for one last one. Martine.
Thank you. Ms. Bishop, Martin Letts from the Lowy Institute. You you touched on the issue of public-private partnerships. I'm wondering whether there are many ways of looking at PPPs and there are different interpretations. I suppose the one that is potentially the most useful but also potentially the most controversial is looking to the private sector to deliver health and education services, and with government, including the Australian government, which still has a lot of big financial investments in PNG, perhaps bearing the risk of those projects and getting around the problem that the government systems are relatively weak in the delivery of these services. Did you go into any depth in that discussion about what PPPs might look like in PNG and how they would work?
We talked about it in general terms. I talked about it with AusAid officials up there and certainly with PNG officials. But we were more discussing the shifting nature of the relationship and what will occur post the realisation of the benefits of the boom, I think. Clearly, PNG is still a significant recipient of Australian aid. The focus is now more on health and education. But there is an expectation in PNG that by 2017, 2018, they'll be in a position to essentially not need anywhere near that level of Australian aid. So we talked about it more in conceptual terms than actually how we could do it over time, but it's certainly something that I'll be talking to the Lowy Institute about to develop some ideas on what we could suggest. I found the PNG officials very open to discussion about changing the nature of development assistance, and any creative ideas, I gather, will certainly be welcomed. That was my impression.
High Commissioner.
Deputy Leader of the Opposition and future Foreign Minister, I'm convinced you will be having said some good things about Papua New Guinea. I'm impressed that your visit was an overview visit, but you've said some gems of detail that for such a short period of time you picked up in a very significant way. So thank you for that. You missed one detail. There are Papua New Guinea supporters of blues, long-suffering blues supporters. But that aside, thank you very much, just to say thank you in a public forum like this with our good friends, Lowy Institute, that you have taken the time to go to Papua New Guinea and also taken the time to come and express your views in this gathering. So thank you, Julie, and appreciate your interest.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I appreciate that very much.
Julie, I think I'll add to the High Commissioner's comments there. We at the Lowy Institute are particularly gratified by your focus on PNG, on Fiji, on other parts of the Pacific, on parts of our near neighbourhood. We, through our opinion polling, have been extremely worried at the lack of attention that Australia and its government are giving to our near neighbourhood. It's enormously significant that you would come here and speak on Papua New Guinea and speak with such insight. So I thank you. I hope we can welcome you back again very soon. And I would like to invite you, ladies and gentlemen, to join me in thanking Julie Bishop.
Thank you.